Welcome to my fifth video. Today, largely what we're going to be doing is bringing together issues from the other four videos because I gotta be honest with you, I had a bit of an ulterior motive here. So, today in particular, we're going to be talking about the liberal arts in relation to Pueyo's article, Coronavirus Why You Must Act Now. So, I've talked about the liberal arts quite a few times this semester, so can anybody remind me what we're talking about when we talk about a liberal arts education? Yes, you there in the hat and vest. So, I know you're not the greatest teacher in the world, but aren't what we talking about with the liberal arts education kind of like a broad based education that's supposed to help us be free, that's supposed to help us be active contributors to a society? Now, I don't know why you needed to talk shit about my teaching, because yes, that's absolutely right. When we're talking about a liberal arts education, we're talking about a broad based education that's supposed to help us be free, that's supposed to help us be active, contributing members of our society. And I think Pueyo's article here gives a nice case why we should care about a liberal arts education, why we should care about being broadly educated in a lot of different disciplines. Because you know what? Real life throws us issues where having this broad based education can be quite helpful. So, we might want to know some things about mathematics because then we were able to understand what people were talking about when they said COVID-19 cases grow exponentially. We were able to understand what people wanted us to do when we said we need to flatten that curve. We wanted to know some things about epistemology, that is, the theory of knowledge, because it was useful to understand how we know that COVID 19 grows exponentially. It was also useful to understand the distinction between true cases and official cases so we could understand that we know that at any particular time we likely don't know the number of actual cases there are of COVID 19. Furthermore, it was useful to know some epidemiology. That is, it was useful to know how we studied distribution and determinants of diseases within human populations, because that allowed us to understand how we get to the conclusion that people over 60, people with heart disease, people with lung disease, and people with diabetes are at higher risk for COVID 19, and the fact that we are social distancing in order to reduce that risk. So, I think that this is one reason we should care about a liberal arts education. It's useful to be educated in a broad way because, again, life throws things at us where having a little bit of knowledge from a lot of different disciplines allows us to contribute to society in the ways we want to and respond to our real life in the ways we want to. Now, I don't want to leave before we touch on the other aspect of a liberal arts education. That is, I want to talk about this connection of an education to freedom. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing more important than freedom. So I want to end here with the story of a couple of different folks who really give us good reason to think about this connection between freedom and education. Of course, there have never been any greater struggles for freedom than struggles against slavery. So here I want to start with the story of someone who was himself an enslaved person and preacher, namely Nat Turner, who was born in 1800 and led the most significant slave rebellion in U.S. history in Virginia in August 1831, which unfortunately cost Turner his life in November 1831 when he was murdered by the state of Virginia. The state was shaken up by this rebellion and spent some time trying to figure out how to respond, but ultimately decided to double down on its oppressive ways when the Virginia legislature passed laws making it illegal for black people to read, to write, or to preach, and made it so black folks couldn't even hold religious meetings without a white person present. So in a very twisted way here, the Virginia legislature seemed to recognize the connection between freedom and education, and rather than supporting both as they ought to, the Virginia legislature decided that the best way for them to try to keep people from being free was to keep them from having a broad education. And not only did Nat Turner live a life which fought against that so hard, we have beautiful thoughts of his speaking to the importance of a broad-based education as well, when he said things like, quote, "To a mind like mine, restless, inquisitive, and observant of everything that was passing, it is easy to suppose that religion was the subject to which it would be directed. And although this subject principally occupied my thoughts, there was nothing that I saw or heard of to which my attention was not directed." And moving toward the end of that century, we also see significant thought about the relationship between freedom and education from W.E.B. Du Bois, who had brilliant things to say about almost any social happening that anyone could think of. Some of Du Bois's early work involved thinking about how, after the end of the Civil War and Reconstruction, how were formerly enslaved people to become a part of American society, a society which has disrespected, dehumanized, and denigrated these people for centuries and centuries. On these issues, Du Bois represented one of the two most popular camps in the black community at this time, the other of which was represented by Booker T. Washington's accommodationism, which involved thinking that black folks should begin by submitting to white political rule in exchange for a guaranteed basic and vocational education. Washington's thought here being that this vocational education would lead to increased economic equality, and economic equality could then be a stepping stone to build up to further forms of equality down the line. But Du Bois was opposed to this way of thinking, and thought that stopping short of a guarantee of full civil rights and a much broader-based, fuller education than vocational training would never allow for equality. And he gave a number of different reasons for believing this, some of them directly challenging Washington's own concerns, and others going beyond them. On the former front, Du Bois says that it would be utterly impossible for working men and property owners to defend their rights and exist without the right of suffrage. The idea here being that increased economic equality could not be protected without civil equality. Going beyond that, Du Bois says that the function of the university is not simply to teach breadwinning or to furnish teachers up for the public schools. It is above all to be the organ of that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life. That is, the real goal of the university is to teach us things that are important to the living of our lives, something I've tried to be suggesting here that a liberal arts education can do when our real lives throw us things like COVID-19.
So, we should love a liberal arts education. We should love a liberal arts education because it's really practical, but it's also really helpful in freedom struggles. And I want to end here with some music. My music suggestions aren't going anywhere. Again, this time it's going to be a Thievery Corporation song, which again involves Mr. Liff and gets into some of the things we've been talking about here really nicely.
Maybe you heard of Nat Turner, the rebellious slave. He's well known because he misbehaved, or rather he behaved in ways that aligned with his people's freedom. So of course you know the system needed to delete him. This happened back in 1831, and nowadays I feel our lives are just a living, breathing issue of the rerun. The power divide, initialized to never skip a season. Look at the collective consciousness and what we've become. The punishment for slave rebellion back then was to limit education for black women and black men. Look at the current cost of education. Plus, check out the music on your local station. Mind-numbing, the times coming to seize a change. The media will spin the shit to make the activists all look deranged. I'm just a mortal man who's talking with you. We all cling to the things we hold true.